It is not lost on us today that the day of the conference is taking place during a No Kings rally. Obviously, we couldn't have known this when we chose the conference dates a year ago, but we hope that you feel, like we do, that the intellectual work that we are doing here is itself a form of resistance. And who better to embody this than our next guest? This year, Widener University in Pennsylvania is home to Dr. Brent's Queer History Mystery, A Journey of Survival, an educational event with a competitive series of informal social justice tasks to explore LGBTQIA+ history, where queer joy is resistance. This theme has been central to the past 10 years of presentations from Dr. Satterly at HPAC by our next speaker. The great height of his kindness, intellect, and generosity is only exceeded by the height of their wigs. You know him, you love them. Please welcome Dr. Satterly and Professor Umbridge.
Oh, hello. Congratulations, everyone. Congratulations. Happy commencement. It is so good to see all of you. I am so excited to be here with you on this commencement day. Pardon? Apparently, it's not commencement day. You could try a different owl. I got a different memo. Please note that this was not my usual outfit. However, I must say it is quite something. Look at this. It's all everything. It's just everything. This is called Umbridge. It's just amazing. Now, hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's so wonderful to have you all here today. I'm going to jump right in, but before I start, I want to say thank you to the Harry Potter Academic Conference at Chestnut Hill, one of the two major aspects of the Harry Potter fandom that helped save my life. And I mean that literally. And all you have to do to know that is to see the last online conference speech that I did, which is available publicly on YouTube. Anyway, I know that sometimes today might be challenging for you all to not be out there marching if that is indeed your thing. However, I just want to say we have this lovely little emotional support dumpster fire for everyone. Isn't that nice? It's fire. It's fire. Everything's on fire. It's true. Yes. This one's name is Rubius. You figure it out. Okay. With that, let me jump into what I'm going to tell you about. I take umbrage with authoritarianism, the queer history of Gryffindor. So, it is said that fiction provides a haven, an escape even, for those who wish to flee, or in some cases confront the dark places of the world. And fandoms of such fantasy grant permission and community to enter it together. Fandom is freedom, where a collective of geeks can share some like-mindedness around a story or an idea, can gather and express fantastical musings in common understanding, questioning and critiquing. In this, they can make meanings around such a story to embody collective freedom of thought, of word, and of deed. Now, normally I often do a PowerPoint-less presentation. However, the things I have to say today, I wanted you to look me in the proverbial eyes. And I wanted to be able to make sure that we weren't taken aback by some PowerPoints. And I want you to just hear my words. Excuse me. Okay. As no one hated freedom more than Dolores J. Umbridge. Armed by a lifetime of self-loathing and empowered by the Minister of Magic himself, she walked into Hogwarts to embody the Cruciatus Curse. Isn't that a great word? Cruciatus Curse, with the one tool stronger than a wand: a quill. As Harry's fifth-year Defense Against the Dark Arts professor and subsequently appointed High Inquisitor, Umbridge found herself in the position to fulfill her lifelong dream of vengeance upon those who deem themselves better than her. And so it was that the little girl who felt less than everywhere she went, this little girl who took her self hatred out on her failure of a family, this little girl who was bullied and hounded by a Hogwarts brood, this little girl who neatly tucked away her own failings in pink kittens and a toad like smile, came armed into her adulthood with a vicious mindset of purity. Such a pure mindset metastasized, allowing for the short circuiting of morality in Dolores. And in a trauma infused amoral woman lusting for vengeance, coupled with a creative mind for sadism, Dolores was already more dominant than the Dark Lord. Voldemort was a snake, whereas Dolores was an upstanding member of the Wizengamot, the Ministry, and the hallowed halls of Hogwarts, and her cauldron bubbled with plans. And while certainly not her first crossing of lines, it was this mindset of unmitigated justification and power that she held when Harry walked into detention. And no one stopped her in the utterance of lies in the classroom. And no one stopped her in the relentless authoring of educational decrees. And no one stopped her in the disappearing of teachers from their posts. And no one stopped her in the torture of the chosen one. And no one stopped her. The parallels of Germany 1933 and the United States of America 2025 are too striking not to name, and I'm a social worker and a Gryffindor, and I'm going to name them. You see, a potion doesn't bubble in 3 minutes. It requires a tested recipe, preparation through the gathering of ingredients, impeccable and proper timing, and the most delicate of hands. Authoritarianism doesn't just happen, it must be orchestrated through legal, political, and cultural machinations. The recipe for fascism is well documented, and Project 2025 had its own set of half blood princes who penned such a recipe in their own advanced potion making tome. The rising of the strong man or woman, the othering and demonizing of the disenfranchised, the sowing of distrust of the press, the conspiring against science, the use of dominance for social controls, the disappearing of the wrong element, the erasure of history, the suppression of critical thinking, the weaponizing of economics, the dissolution of systemic guardrails, the elimination of dissonance, the burning of art, and the utter smashing of hope. If comics are the proverbial banana peel in the coal mine, Umbridge is the vacuum that snuffs out laughter. And the Umbridges of our time are too many to name, my friends. From Columbia University, where federal curricular oversight is now required, to the University of Pennsylvania, my alma mater, where trans athletes are banned, coupled with the university apologies to cisgender athletes harmed by previously inclusive policies, to Brown University, where professors are targeted when accused of anti Semitism in anonymous student evaluations, and more. Dr. Christopher Emdin said, education is the civil rights issue of our time. They know that. Do we? I must not tell lies. We're in danger. Now, fear not. I wouldn't leave you there, remember? You got a little boy. Don't worry. I won't leave you there. I am Gryffindor. We embody action, courage, and hope, and we do not shy away from Umbridge. We mock her. Yes, history teaches us that fascist strongmen hate mockery, and it reveals their weakness. Yep, they're powerful with curses of all kinds. It's true. But the more you tighten your grip, Tarkin, the more star systems will slip through your fingers. So let me invoke queer history here. Yes, history is replete with communities and social movements who have resisted such oppressors. All you have to do to find ways to counter fear and despair to move forward is to look back and see how those who came before, our ancestors, who have fought with such bravery that it would steal the literal breath of a Dementor. However, we know that bravery alone is not enough. We must question beyond the norms, strategize plans of resistance, and care for us all. And it just so happens that we have houses that embody characteristics of intellect, cunning, and care. So grant me some poetic and historical license, my friends. Him and open your minds to hear stories of resistance that embody the colors of the rainbow and the promise of hope. We are Gryffindor. We are Fred and George Weasley. We abandon the insistence of the expectations of conventional success to pursue joy. We undermine Umbridge's hold on classroom control with skiving snack boxes and Umbridgeitis, and we are the first to publicly resist her. We are also Cloud Cahoon, famous surrealist artist, and Marcel Moore, their wife. These two queer folks found themselves living under the Nazi occupation of the Isle of Jersey in the English Channel in 1940. With the prospect of a Nazi invasion of Jersey looking very likely, Cloud and Marcel refused to evacuate the island and go back to England like many of their neighbors. Instead, they decided to mount an underground resistance campaign following the occupation that year. Cloud believed that not all the German soldiers stationed in Jersey were Nazis, and with some inspiration could be encouraged to overthrow the Nazi regime on the island. So they began a two-person resistance campaign that could have ultimately led to their deaths. Especially courageous, as Cloud had been born into a Jewish family, although they did not declare themselves Jewish as required by the German order in October 1940. Their campaign involved propaganda in the form of false news sheets, known as resistance notes. Despite radios being declared illegal in 1942, Cloud and Marcel kept one hidden and listened to news from BBC radio broadcasts. Marcel had not declared that she was fluent in the German language and used this skill to translate such BBC news into German. Cloud would convert this into poems and other witty pieces of writings. The words were typed or handwritten onto small sheets of tissue paper, and Marcel would sometimes add illustrations. They intended these notes to seem as though they were written by a German officer from within the occupying force, and they were signed to Soldat ohne Namen, the soldier with no name. The notes were distributed by Cloud and Marcel themselves. They made special trips into the local town and left the notes in soldiers' coat pockets and on cafe tables. As the occupation went on, and in fact tobacco became an increasingly rare commodity, they discovered that by placing notes inside cigarette packets, they were more likely to be picked up and read by the German soldiers. As Cahoon's mouthpiece, the soldier without a name is fully aware of the contradictions and ironies of his master's positions, using mockery to undermine the Nazi leadership, highlighting German defeats and Allied triumphs. In one note, which features an illustration of a sinking ship, Hitler is mocked as the subject of the joke. The note plays on a well-known German folktale about the Lorelei, a type of siren that would sit on the banks of the Rhine River and lure sailors to their death. More soldiers in Jersey would have been aware of this folktale, and here Cloud had written, "I believe in the end the waves devoured both sailor and boat, and that was brought about by Adolf Hitler with his screaming." Through this parody, Hitler is luring sailors to their death, and not with a beautiful song as in the traditional tale, but with his rantings and screamings. The poem seeks to emasculate Hitler by putting him in the place of a well-known female character. Another of the resistance notes reads, "Hitler leads us, Goebbels speaks for us, Göring eats for us, Ley drinks for us. Himmler's murders for us, but nobody dies for us. We die." This is seeking to stir up disillusionment between the soldiers and their leaders by highlighting the gap that exists between them and by pointing out how the ordinary soldiers are being exploited. Other resistance notes openly threaten the occupiers, as can be seen in this example, which reads, "The cowardly police bureaucrats who thrive on lies and shameful cruelty will be destroyed by the soldiers with no name." Their resistance activities also took other forms. One of the island's labor camps was actually positioned only a short distance from their home, known as La Roquais, and the enslaved workers housed there suffered horrific treatment, malnutrition, and poor health. Cahoon and Moore frequently distributed food to the prisoners under the cover of darkness during the hours of curfew by sneaking in at night. Additionally, St. Berlad's Cemetery was right next to La Roque's, their home. In fact, the section of the graveyard given over to the German dead lay directly beside their house, and they frequently watched military funerals through their windows. They took the opportunity to deposit more of their notes into the German staff cars parked outside their home. Their personal danger was heightened by the fact the Soldatenheim, a type of social soldier club, was located at the St. Berlade's Bay Hotel opposite their home. Their quiet underground two-person campaign created the illusion of a large-scale resistance movement. Such an operation against the regime lasted a risky 4 years and provoked the German authorities, who spent years looking for the perpetrators. Finally, in the summer of 1944, the Gestapo, or the German Secret Service, entered La Roque's to investigate the sisters. Claude and Marcel were arrested as their operation was discovered. Their trial took place on November 16, 1944, during which the pair were sentenced to death for activities undermining the German forces and 6 months imprisonment for possessing a radio and listening to the BBC. On hearing the sentence, Cloud, with typical dry humor, asked, "Which of these two sentences is going to be carried out first?" During their time in prison, Cloud and Marcel were separated. However, using the ventilation systems, they were able to pass notes back and forth to communicate to each other. Fortunately, their death sentence was never carried out because the island of Jersey was liberated from German rule only a year later. During their time in prison, Cloud befriended a German soldier, a fellow prisoner, who had given them the badges from his uniform. In Cloud's typical dry humor, they later took the patch, bit it, and made art out of the image. We are Gryffindor. We are Ravenclaw. We are Luna and Xenophilius Lovegood. Sorry about that, Ravenclaws. We make room for science. We question the status quo. We embody critical thinking in the free press. We publish ideas. We are Magnus Hirschfeld. Magnus was a pioneering German physician and sexologist whose intellectual resistance to the Nazis was rooted in his lifelong advocacy for queer folks, scientific inquiry, and human rights. His work and activism stood in stark contrast to the ideology of the Nazi regime, which promoted rigid gender roles, racial purity, and the persecution of LGBTQIA+ individuals. In 1897, Hirschfeld co-founded Wissenschaft Humanitaria Komitee, the first organization in history to advocate for homosexual rights. Its motto, "Justice through Science," reflected his belief that empirical research could combat prejudice. This was a radical stance and laid the groundwork for later resistance to fascist ideologies. After World War I, Hirschfeld established the Institut für Sexualwissenschaft in Berlin, a hub for research, education, and activism. The Institute offered medical services, published studies on sexuality and gender, and housed one of the world's first archives on LGBTQIA+ life. It also supported transgender individuals and advocated for legal reforms, including the repeal of paragraph 175, which criminalized male homosexuality. Hirschfeld's longtime companion and collaborator, Carl Gies, played a vital role in the Institute's operation. Gies managed the archives and was deeply involved in research and public education. Their relationship, through discreet due to societal norms, was a source of emotional and intellectual support for Hirschfeld. Hirschfeld's work directly challenged the Nazis' racial and sexual norms. He was Jewish, openly gay, and vocal critic of nationalism and militarism. His advocacy for sexual minorities and gender's nonconformity was seen as degenerate by the Nazis, who targeted him and his institution early in their rise to power. In 1930, Hirschfeld left Germany for a lecture tour and never returned. After the Nazis came to power in 1933, they raided and destroyed the Institute for Sexual Science, publicly burning its libraries and archives. We often see that particular image when referring to book burning today. Hirschfeld, in exile in France, continued to write and speak out against fascism until his death in 1935. The Institute housed one of the first archives of queer life, including photographs, personal testimonies, medical records, and stories of love. It also supported gender affirming surgeries and hormone treatments decades ahead of their time. Hirschfeld's intellectual resistance was not through armed struggle, but through science, education, and advocacy. His legacy lives on in the field of sexology, LGBTQIA plus rights, and the broader fight against authoritarianism and intolerance and anti-intellectualism. We are Ravenclaw. We are Slytherin. We are Severus Snape. Shout out, Lori. We exist in silence in the pursuit of what's right. We provide strategies for success, even to those who annoy us. We design stratagems to undo malevolence. We are Beert van Buren. Beert van Buren was born in 1902 and spent her childhood in the Jordan district of Amsterdam before opening her legendary cafe bar, Café de Mange, or the Basket, as it's known in English, on the Zeit, a street in the city center red light district in Amsterdam in 1927. Since the 17th century, the Zeit has been known as an unsafe area where sailors, sex workers, criminals, and others living on the margins of society frequented. It was a place of partying, of dancing, where lost provincial visitors were robbed, and where during the famous centuries old Hartstad, or Hearts Day, festival in August, men would dress as women and vice versa. The cafe stood out as a safe place in the Zeit. Although Temanja was hardly advertised as a gay bar, it was a place where anyone gay, straight, bi, or otherwise could have a drink, provided they behaved themselves. This included folks of different social classes, which was a no-no generally since other establishments often only cater to upper-class men. Café de Mange was subversive in that respect. Not unlike the police brutality of the 1960s and today in the US, where they targeted Stonewall, the police could harass customers and possibly revoke a bar's license for promoting what today would be called a gay lifestyle. One of the ways Beert helped alert patrons included the use of her owl-shaped lamp. It was known among all the patrons that when the owl lamp was turned on, that meant Beert thought there were undercover cops in her bar. Because of this police harassment, Beard also kept a close eye and a close watch on her patrons, making sure there weren't any obvious displays of affection between same-sex couples, with perhaps the exception of Queen's Day, a tradition that began after World War II. On this magical day, pretty much anything was possible, and Tamange gained a reputation as the ultimate place to party and celebrate this Dutch holiday. That said, Bet usually took an interest in her patrons, and if she observed any men misbehaving, she would penalize them by cutting off their tie with a butcher knife and hang them from the ceiling. These ties are still hanging there today. I know. I've seen them. As time passed, Beard became one of the chief attractions of her bar, and that hardly surprising given her appearance and demeanor. An openly gay woman who drank like a fish and smoked like a chimney, she was also known for her risque wardrobe, which included a leather motorcycle jacket. This naturally raised a few eyebrows in her time, but she wasn't only the first person to open a gay-friendly bar in the Netherlands, but also the first Dutch woman to gain a driver's license. She was, in effect, the first proverbial dyke on a bike. When the Netherlands capitulated in 1940 and was occupied then by Nazi Germany, it was a shock for many Dutch queer folks. They had heard stories about the persecution of homosexuals in Germany and the destruction of Hirschfeld's Institute for Sexual Wissenschaft in Berlin. Advocacies, organizations for homosexuals were dissolved, and magazines were shut down, after which all documentation of members and subscribers were destroyed. In 1941, the Amsterdam Police Commissioner provided a list to the Veiligheidsdienst, i.e., the Secret Service or the SS, with the names of people known as to the police as homosexual. In this uncertain period, strangely enough, more queer bars appeared in Amsterdam. The exact reason for this is unclear. Perhaps some pubs financially benefited from the curious German soldiers who visited them. However, due to the fear of checks by the same German soldiers, many homosexual men and women dared not visit these public venues. Zeit, however, was a slightly different story. Due to its subversive reputation, German soldiers were prohibited from going there during their free time. This created opportunities for Beert, who managed to maintain the reputation of her cafe as a refuge during the war years. Wild stories circulate about Beert van Buren's activities during the war. It is said that she hid weapons for the resistance group of Gerrit van der Veen in her attic. These weapons were nearly discovered by a German patrol, if not for Van Buren's quick wit, which helped her talk the soldiers into leaving. Additionally, she also regularly hid several Jewish people in the basement of Tamange, where German soldiers, whether homosexual or not, sometimes came to Van Buren's cafe for a beer despite the ban. Beert would stomp hard on the floor. This would alert those hiding in the basement to sneak out the back temporarily for safety. When one particular patrol arrived demanding to search the cafe, she gave him a tour, offered him a drink, and proceeded to proverbially drink him under the table. She gently then ejected him, but given her forthrightness and salt of the earth persona, the German officer got the impression that she was on their side, and the Jewish people could then return inside for safety. One of the many anecdotes about her and her cafe tells of a German soldier who was amazed at the number of photos of the Queen and the royal family hanging in the pub. Such declarations of loyalty to the Dutch sovereign were, of course, forbidden by the occupiers. These acts of resistance contributed greatly to how Beert was remembered, combative, courageous, and stubborn. When the Queen of the Zeit passed away in 1967, Beert was laid out on a billiard table of her bar where 30,000 people paid their respects to her over the course of 2 days. Beert saved countless lives and made a difference in the face of Nazism, not just with strategically providing arms, but also with providing a safe space, a refuge. She was able to use her business to provide sanctuary and overtly resist the occupation. We are Slytherin. And we are Hufflepuff. We are Newt Scamander. We care for those who are vulnerable. We feed the hungry. We create havens for those in need. We put ourselves on the line to make sure our nifflers, our swooping evils, and our bowtruckles are okay. We are Dr. Kristen Rice. In the 1980s, as HIV/AIDS emerged as a devastating and poorly understood epidemic in the United States, Dr. Rice became the first and, for a time, the only physician in Utah willing to treat patients with the disease. Dr. Rice began treating AIDS patients in 1981, often working alongside her physician assistant and later wife, Maggie Snyder. Their practice became known as the Gays and Grays Clinic, serving LGBTQ plus individuals and elderly patients who had nowhere else to turn. At a time when fear, stigma, and misinformation led many healthcare providers to turn away from those infected, Dr. Rice chose compassion and care. In fact, she refused to wear gloves during exams to show solidarity, to touch the patients, to reduce stigma. What started as hospice care for highly stigmatized individuals became a model for compassionate care across the country at the height of the AIDS epidemic. She faced stigma and blame in a repressive religious culture and had to find creative ways to serve her patients. They developed backdoor patient arrangements, underground drug markets, and status confidentiality policies to give their patients the best possible chance of prolonging their lives, or at worst, dying comfortably and not alone. When their families, their churches, and social circles, their politicians, and even other doctors had abandoned them, Kristen Rice and Maggie Snyder created a safe haven amid a sea of hate and fear for those who had nowhere else to turn. Dr. Rice and Snyder provided not only medical treatment, but emotional support, often sitting with patients in their final moments. Their work helped humanize the epidemic and fostered a sense of dignity for those affected. Her clinic cared for 90% of Utah's AIDS patients between 1982 and 2001. Dr. Rice's work empowered LGBTQ plus individuals to come out and advocate for their rights. and her example influenced broader historic healthcare practices and policies. We are Hufflepuff. We are Hermione Granger. We insist on practical magic. We organize Dumbledore's army. We jinx those who betray the cause. We think quickly to preserve our friends. We are Ron Weasley. We stand by our friends. We display loyalty to those who deserve it and some who don't. We open our families to love those who need it. We are Harry Potter. We go underground to teach resistance. We show courage for those who need to see it. We endure what must be endured. We lead. Do not despair in the face of such an Umbridge. Rather, look to the past movements of queer folks, Black and brown communities, people with disabilities, religious minorities, and more to find all the magic you need. Thank you. Oh, look at all those little hearts and claps. Oh my goodness. You like me. You really like me. Maybe. Oh, yes. Yeah, you still some hearts coming there. Yeah, I see that. Oh, that's so nice. Oh, they don't pay me enough for this.